All right, welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're prying open two brand new windows into, well, the most complex object we know of, the brain. We're going to see how scientists are finally starting to connect the dots between our genes, the neurons they build, and the behaviors that make us who we are. So, let's go ahead and peer through these windows and see what's on the other side.
You know, this has been the question for centuries. How does this stuff inside our heads create the entire universe of our experience? It's a mystery that stumped the greatest minds in history. But the tools we have to tackle it, they are going through an absolute revolution.
So, for the longest time, neuroscience was kind of like trying to understand a symphony by just listening to a single violin. We could study one neuron at a time, which is amazing, but it's not the whole story. Now, we can listen to the entire orchestra at once. We can study how huge populations of neurons coordinate to produce this symphony of behavior. And that shift in perspective, it changes everything.
Okay, so that brings us to our very first window. We're moving beyond just looking at the brain's physical hardware, the cells and the wires. We're starting to see its software, a kind of hidden structure that sets the rules for all that neural activity.
Okay, the core idea here goes by a kind of intimidating name, a neural manifold. But trust me, the concept is way more intuitive than it sounds. Just think of it like this. Your brain's activity isn't just a random jumble of neurons firing. It's constrained. It follows these preferred paths and patterns, almost like cars on a hidden road system. That road system, that hidden landscape, that's the neural manifold.
All right, so why is this such a big deal? Well, this idea, this manifold concept, it cracked a classic puzzle. I want you to think about something you do every day, like reaching for your coffee. Your brain plans that entire movement, the trajectory, the muscle commands, before your arm even twitches. So how does it keep the planning signals from accidentally triggering the go signals?
And the solution they found is, well, it's just brilliant. Researchers discovered that the brain activity for preparing to move travels along one specific road in this hidden geometry. Then, when it's time to actually make the move, the activity spills over onto a totally different road, one that's mathematically orthogonal, which is just a fancy way of saying they're completely independent, like a north-south street versus an east-west street. The signals for plan and go never get mixed up until the exact right moment.
So get this, the key isn't some physical wall in the brain, it's geometry. The preparation and the action are literally happening in different dimensions within the very same group of neurons. The shape of this hidden landscape is what keeps them apart. I mean, how cool is that? It's just such an elegant solution to a really fundamental problem.
And this idea, it's so powerful. It helps us understand how the same group of neurons can juggle different jobs, how you can be planning your next move while you're still making the current one, and maybe most amazing of all, how all of our different brains might actually be running on the same universal geometric operating system.
Okay, so that's window number one. But if the manifold is the software, the big question is, what's writing the code? So for our second window, we're zooming way in to look at the genes that actually build all this.
And to do that, we got to talk about the humble fruit fly. Seriously. So meet two different species. One courts its mate with a song, which is this very specific wing vibration. The other one has a totally different move. It offers its partner a gift of regurgitated food. Super romantic, right?
Now, what's really wild is that these two species split off from each other about 35 million years ago. And over all that time, they evolved these completely different hardwired courtship dances. So you'd naturally think the brain circuits for these behaviors would be worlds apart, right? Built from the ground up, totally different.
But here's where the mystery starts. Scientists knew that one single gene, nicknamed fruitless, is kind of the master controller for courtship in both species. So if it's the same basic gene pulling the strings, how on earth do you get such wildly different outcomes?
Well, the answer, after just an incredible amount of genetic detective work, turned out to be almost laughably simple. The entire massive difference between a song and a gift, a difference 35 million years in the making, all came down to this.
Just one. A single gene flicked on in a tiny, specific group of neurons. That's it. That was the whole ballgame.
And this is the play-by-play. It's just amazing. The researchers went into the seeing fly and flipped the fruitless switch on in a small cluster of neurons where it's usually off. What happened? Those neurons physically grew new branches, new connections, and wired themselves into the brain's main courtship center. And boom! Just like that, the singing fly started performing this super complex, gift-giving behavior from a totally different species.
All right, let's take a breath. We've got these two amazing stories. One is about this high-level abstract geometry in the brain. The other is about a tiny little genetic switch in a fly. They seem like they're from different planets, right? But this is where it all comes together.
Well, as Dr. Yusuke Hara, one of the researchers, said, evolution doesn't always have to build something brand new. Sometimes it just tinkers. It just does a little bit of genetic rewiring in a few of the cells you've already got to create a whole new behavior.
So this is the big question, the one that ties this whole explainer together. What does the hidden geometry in a monkey's brain have to do with a genetic switch in a fruit fly?
Here it is. This is the connection. It's a beautiful cascade. Genes are the architects. They draw the blueprints. Those blueprints tell the circuits how to get built, and the activity flowing through those circuits creates the hidden geometry, the manifold. And that geometry, those invisible roads and highways in the brain, is what ultimately shapes what we see on the outside, behavior.
So where does this leave us? What does it all mean for the future of understanding our own brains?
It means that for the first time, we can look at a behavior from two incredible vantage points at once. We can see the high-level software, that manifold geometry that's running the show. And we can zoom all the way down and read the literal lines of genetic code that wrote that software in the first place. It's the whole picture.
And that leaves us with a pretty mind-bending thought to end on. As these windows into the brain get bigger and clearer, they're not just telling us about flies and monkeys. They're starting to reveal the instruction manual for our own minds, our own feelings, our own actions. And if we can read the geometry and begin to write the code, it forces us to ask a really, really big question about what it all means.